Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto was cursed with loving hearts and had Erza Scarlet as harem lover? Movie. Naruto was walking to the guild today while carrying some roses in his hands. He was planning to ask Erza out today, and hopefully things would go well. Yeah, he's considered the weakest in his guild, but still she seemed nice enough for him to at least try and ask out. Naruto remembered ever since he joined Fairy Tail he had earned the title as the loser of Fairy Tail. This was mostly among his guild mates, and that title hurt him a lot, but he still kept a smile on his face and just muscled through it. He had it rough with some of the members of the guild, considering they took every opportunity to insult him or hit him for his incompetence. The people that took it to the next level for him were the S-classes. Laxus, the master's grandson, Erza Scarlet, and Marahan Strauss. These three are some of the main people who always remind him that he is an embarrassment to the guild as it is. Laxus made it clear to him when he becomes guild master, he was the first person he would boot out. He made sure to attack him and knock him around whenever he wanted to, or when his grandfather or Gildart weren't looking. Then Marahan made it clear she was embarrassed he would even claim he was from their guild, considering he couldn't do a mission without help. The times that they were together either led to him being beaten up by her or having to give her his money to avoid getting his ass kicked. Even then, she just might beat the hell out of him for kicks. Erza always talked about how embarrassed she was with him not being able to do anything without help. She ridicules him when he tries different spells, and they end up not working for him. One time he tried his hand at some lightning magic Makarov gave him and he couldn't do it. The guild laughed at him and continued to taunt him, while Erza basically shook her head and called him a disgrace. Even so, he tried to keep a smile on his face, knowing someday they would welcome him like the other members, and treat him like family. Natsu and Gray didn't bother with him because of their own personal issues with each other, or just the fact they thought he wasn't worth the time of day. But there was a silver lining in the whole thing, considering he had three people he could always count on whenever they were there. Levi, who was a young mage like himself, she was the one that always told him that just because he couldn't do the basic magic, just meant he already had his magical alignment, which meant that he had magic, it just hadn't been activated yet. She was always positive around him, and they shared their love of books with each other. Naruto didn't know it, but Levi had a crush on him, and always disapproved how the guild, especially her teammates, treated Naruto from time to time. Then there was Master Makarov and Gildart, that is, whenever he was around. They both treated him like a child at times, but they were always welcoming whenever he needed help, and they would give it to him. Makarov made sure that he was okay, and if he had his money stolen, Makarov would find out who took it and take it back from them. While this would lead to him getting his ass kicked again, it didn't bother him. At least he had someone in the guild that respected and loved him unconditionally like Levi. Gildart was another person he had become close to over the years. After he found Naruto walking home from a mission because his partner, Erza, took all of his money and bought only one ticket, saying this was his punishment for doing nothing. Let's just say that when Gildart got back in town, Erza learned very quickly to not cross Naruto again, and afterwards he gave her a warning, that if she tried something like that again, she would be booted out of the guild. So after that day, Naruto always hung out with Gildart when he was in town, and Gildart treated him like son. Considering the fact that Naruto barely remembered his parents. No one in the land knew who his father or mother were. All they knew was that both were incredibly powerful mages that had to leave him behind to protect him. Naruto didn't understand this, but he knew that their reasons were believable. But he would have liked a letter or something to tell him they loved him. That's not too much to ask for, right? Well, Naruto had finally arrived at the guild building, and he was admiring it. He always dreamed that one day he would meet a real fairy and find out if they really did have tails or not. However, his main focus was going to Erza and asking her out. So entering the building, he saw another brawl had broken out, and Natsu and Gray were in the center of it all. Naruto scanned the room, and he saw Erza watching the whole thing with a bored and embarrassed look in her eyes. He walked up to her and handed her the flowers, which caused her to raise an eyebrow at him. "Erza, would you go on a date with me?" The whole guild went quiet at that moment, and Makarov was watching this scene with a critical eye. Just in case something happened that would cross a personal line with him. "Why would I bother going out with someone as stupid and weak as you?" She threw the flowers on the ground and stomped on them, then went back to eating her cake. The whole guild broke out, laughing at him, except for Levi who was just looking at him with sadness in her eyes. Makarov on the other hand, was furious with how harsh Erza was with Naruto, and was planning to confront her about this. But before he could do anything, he heard something he never heard before. Sniffling from Naruto. The whole guild looked at him, as they also heard it, and they saw that he was truly heartbroken there. Without waiting for anyone, he ran out of the guild building and into the forest, desperately trying to hide from everyone there. He was sobbing while walking through the forest. He spent weeks working up the courage to ask her out, but to be treated like this. There was nothing else to say. He was weak and people would never respect him the way he was now. He collapsed on the ground and started crying his eyes out there. He just bawled until he finally felt his tears stop running out. But the pain was still there and he couldn't stand it. He got on his feet again and started running without looking where he was going now. Soon Naruto felt stone beneath his feet and looked up to see that he was now in some kind of cave. He decided he wasn't going back to the guild for a while, so why not explore a little bit. Walking down the empty torchlit pathways, he couldn't help looking around, and saw that there was some odd paintings on the wall. Some of them looked like dragons, and others looked like humans with wings of butterflies if he had to guess. They were depicting a battle where there was much carnage and violence that it ended with the picture of a small white-haired girl in purple standing alone with a pair of wings on her back. Naruto stared at the picture. In a weird way she reminded him of him. All alone in the world without people to really love and care for him in the beginning. Yes, he had Levi, Makarov, and Gildart, but that was it really. Everyone else pretty much treated him like a joke or a glorified punching bag on their off time. Being Naruto, he couldn't hate them for it, he just couldn't. All he wanted was a family, and in a family, he heard you were supposed to forgive the others for every sin they might have committed. But now he wasn't sure about that idea. However, Naruto sensed, or thought he sensed, something behind him and quickly turned around. There was nothing there but an empty cavern. Man, I'm really jumpy today. Naruto continued down the cavern hallway, and eventually he could feel something at the walled end of it. Looking closely he saw there was something stuck in a boulder there. It looked like a sword of some kind, and it was giving off some kind of evil vibe to it as well. Looking closely at the object, Naruto saw that it was totally black blade with red engravings at the handle, and the bottom part of the blade. Looking at the boulder, Naruto noticed that there were some kind of inscriptions at the bottom of the. Walking up to the rock he read the inscriptions. Whoever shall remove this sword will receive tremendous power to overcome any obstacle in one's path. However, one must be of truly pure heart, and one cannot lie to oneself of the sins one has committed. If thou thinkest thou art the one, pull the sword and see if it chooses thee as its new master. Naruto figured, what the hell? He reached for the blade, and when he touched the smooth handle a shock went through his entire body. But he pushed past it and pulled. Within seconds the blade smoothly came out of the rock. Now he was holding the dark sword that weighed almost nothing in his hands. But now he was feeling all kinds of evil vibes flowing through his body, and he was starting to get lightheaded. Finally unable to stand, he collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain from the foreign magic pushing itself through his body. While he was laying there half dead, there was someone watching him, and they were now intrigued with the boy that managed to remove the sword from the rock. That fairy tale, slap, that was a sound that was ringing throughout the entire hall. Levi, the girl that was sweet to everyone, had just slapped Erza across the face. She, Erza, was visibly shocked. She got slapped and was wondering, why. Okay, maybe she had an idea, but she didn't understand why she was slapped for it. You bitch. Everyone was blown away. The quiet Levi had right out cursed someone. This was a first in her life, but she was on a roll now and running with it. How could you treat him like that? He has done nothing but been nice to you and the rest of this stupid guild, and you all treat him like shit. That goes double for you, Murahin. Mira was shocked that she was put on the spot right now, and wondering why Levi was angry at her now. You've been stealing his money that he uses to buy food and pay his rent to satisfy your own selfish needs. Now this was a shock to Makarov as he thought he put an end to that earlier on, but it would seem he needed to remind some people about crossing that line again. Calm down, Levi, so what if she broke the heart of that loser? Jet was trying to calm down Levi, and so was Troy, but now she was angry with him now. Don't you dare call him a loser. I know for a fact he is twice the mage and person you two will ever be. I've put up with your behavior for as long as I could, but you know what? I'm done. You two can work together with someone else because our team is done. Everybody was shocked now. Shadow Gear was broken up, and it looked like she would never consider working with them again. Levi was now turning her attention back to Erza, but Makarov got in between them and stopped her. But he could see tears running down her face, showing she wasn't only upset with Erza hurting Naruto, but also the fact she loved him, and wanted him to ask her out instead. She ran out of the hall and went back to her place to try and recover from her fitful day. Master Makarov loved his children very much, but this was unacceptable. Sure, some teasing and maybe a little taunting was good for everyone to stay motivated. But this downright bullying made him sick and he was going to deal with it right now. Turning to Erza, he took the roses off the ground and put them in a nearby cup with water in it. He then looked at her with a stern look on his face and said, Erza, your actions as of today have gone too far. A simple no would have sufficed, but instead you had to break a poor boy's heart in every shape way. That makes me sick to my stomach thinking I went wrong somewhere when teaching you. Do you think Uncle Rob would approve of this disgusting action? This hit home for Erza because outside of Makarov, Rob was the one person in the world she cared for his opinion more than anything. He would be disgusted with how she treated Naruto, and more than likely would never speak to her again for it. She slowly realized that Naruto was only trying to be nice with her and ask her out because he had crush on her. Along with admiration for what she had accomplished in such a short time as well. As of this moment, Erza Scarlet, you are no longer an S-class. You will now be receiving a pay cut as well. You may test for your rank in 2 years' times, but that's only if Naruto hasn't done anything rash, understand? If he has, then you are no longer allowed to be a mage of this guild, understand? She nodded her head solemnly and accepted that she deserved this punishment after what she did to Naruto. Makarov looked out at the rest of the guild and said, as for the rest of you, I would suggest you start looking for Naruto. because if he does not return to the guild or dies somewhere, you all will be forbidden from ever becoming S-classes, and top that you will all explain to Gildart why this happened in the first place. Everyone wasn't too bothered by the first part, but when he mentioned Gildart, everyone paled. They remembered the last time someone picked on Naruto when Gildart was around and that guy was still in intensive care. That was a lesson they didn't want to learn firsthand at all. The guild immediately scattered looking for Naruto everywhere, and Makarov was sitting at the bar, wondering where he was now. His only thoughts were, please be safe Naruto. The cave. Naruto felt his head throbbing like hell and was wondering where he was right now. Looking around he saw that he was still in the cave from before. Standing up, he felt a slight weight in his hand, and saw that it was the black sword from earlier. Funny, he didn't expect the sword to actually come out of the rock. Well, now he was about to swing it, but he heard a tapping noise from in front of him. Looking up, he saw something that shocked him to the core. It was the girl from the cave painting. She had long white silver hair with bright blue eyes. She was wearing a purple frilly dress with armor that was on her arms and legs and covering her chest as well. There was even an armor piece covering her head as well. On top of this, she was holding a notepad and a pen in her hand with something written on it. He looked closely at the note and it read, "Happy you are awake now." She had then wrote another note, "You successfully removed the sword from the stone." He nodded his and said, "Yes, so does that mean it's mine now?" "Yes it is, but it comes with a price though. For using the sword means that if you were to kill someone, then you will feel them as they are dying." "I see, for this power comes a steep price, is that what you are saying?" She nodded her head and scribbled something else. "I should tell you that sword is of my creation, and it was meant for someone to bear the pain I feel from killing my enemies for me. So you created it so that, in a way, you can kill someone without feeling the life leave their body, is it?" She nodded her head and looked away from him. "Well then, I will bear your burden for you." She turned back to him and she had a shocked look on her face. Only one other person had ever removed the sword, but they turned it down because they didn't want to feel the pain that would come with killing someone. So it was no deal for them. They went off and got themselves killed not too long afterwards, so hey, no skin off her bones. She offered them the sword and they refused, but now this boy wanted to use it and keep the pain from her. "I have a question if you don't mind." She nodded her head and then he continued, "What are you?" "I saw a painting not too long ago that looked exactly like you." She looked at him for a minute and then gathered a giant board in front of her from somewhere. Then she took out a pen and started writing down some things. "I am part of a race known as Fairs. We are one of the top 3 races in the world and we're known for our incredible strength and prowess on the battlefield. There was some things about my birth that stirred up the other 2 factions, which led to a bloody war that lasted hundreds of years. Eventually the war ended with me being sealed into this cave by my mother and our race, destroying most of the other 2 factions along with us." Naruto nodded his head and asked, "So what were the 2 of the races you were fighting?" "Gods and dragons." Naruto's eyes opened wide at that explanation, considering she is telling him her race fought 2 of the most powerful beings in the world, and their race actually managed to survive and defeat both of them. It seems unreal, but he remembered her mentioning the war started because of her. "What about what you said earlier, about the war being started because of you?" "My birth is a contradiction of the world around us. I'm both life and death as one being. I'm the one who can grant immortality and end lives with nothing more than a word. I've mastered both death magic and life magic, along with space and time, to the point I can freeze the world around me, and kill them without them even knowing it until it's too late. I can render magic useless, take it away, and bless those with it if they prove worthy of it. In the end I was born of a being of darkness and a being of light, and in doing this I became someone who has the potential to destroy the world as it is. One man knew this and tried to face me, but I defeated him and sent him away afterwards. Then another being challenged me before I was sealed and I crushed him as well. I am the strongest in the world, and no one can match me no matter how hard they try. I'm perfect in every way, but yet I'm alone now without anyone to be there for me now." Naruto couldn't take it anymore. He walked up to the girl and hugged her right there. She was shocked at what he was doing, but he said, "Well, if that is how you feel, then let me promise you this then. I will be by your side no matter what, and when our time comes, we will be together even in the afterlife." The blue-eyed girl had tears running down her face now, and was hugging him back, thanking him for promising this to her. "By the way, I've been meaning to ask for your name." She looked at him with a small smile and tears running down her face. She wrote, "I was named Euclid Helseth, but you may call me you for short." "Okay then you, can you tell me what I have to do next?" "You must meditate with the sword on your lap and meet the spirit that dwells within it. Once there, it shall teach you how to fight and grow from continual use of the blade itself. Do be warned that the blade is darkness in nature, along with light, so too much of one of them has adverse side effects. Gotcha, well, wish me luck." "Good luck." Naruto placed the sword on his lap and closed his eyes and took some deep breaths. Sword world. Naruto's eyes opened to some new world he had never seen before. The place was unusual as it is, and it was like a world with floating islands as far as the eye can see. Everything seemed to be hanging in midair, and there was no one else in sight. Naruto soon felt a presence behind him, and quickly swung the sword in his hand and deflected the attack. This was coming from a female warrior who was looking at him with golden eyes. She had on some purple armor dress with some of it connecting to her face as well. Her hair was in a tied-up bun, and she was looking at Naruto with an intense, scrutinizing stare. "Who are you, boy?" "I'm the one who pulled the sword out of the stone." She raised an eyebrow at this and examined him closer. This was her new master. It had to be a joke, but considering her last wielder, he was an improvement over him. "Very well, I'm Saber and the spirit of the sword you now wield." Naruto nodded his head. "So does that mean that we are now partners then?" "Yes, however, you must first learn to wield the sword and its awesome power before you can go off in the world." Naruto nodded his head and said, "Bring it on. I won't let you down." The corners of her lips drifted upwards slightly and then she announced, "First lesson, to handle, dodge and then counterattack." Fairy tale. One day later, everyone in the guild was in a rut right now. They had searched high and low for Naruto in Magnolia and the forest, but they couldn't find him. Some of the members gave up after looking for a few hours because they weren't worried about him. They even talked about how the master wasn't going to punish them for this, and probably ban him from returning to the guild as well. This led to them losing their guild marks and being booted out of the guild by one pissed-off master. Makarov, himself, was worried now because after a day of searching, Naruto was nowhere to be found. If he left the surrounding areas, there was no telling what could have happened to him. On top of that, if Gildarts was to return anytime soon, then he would be even more pissed off about this situation, and he might just seriously hurt some people. He prayed the man didn't return anytime soon. Shifting in place now. Shit, well that was too much for him to hope for. The man was in town now and most likely heading straight for the guild. When he walked through those doors he was going to announce himself to everyone, and then ask where Naruto is. This will lead to future problems and probably more paperwork as well. The hall doors opened and in walked a red-haired man with a scraggly beard on his face, and wearing a black traveler's cloak and a grey shirt and black pants. This was the legendary ace of Fairy Tail, Gildarts Clive. He was well known throughout the land as the man powerful enough to run Fairy Tail, but chooses not to do it. His explanation. He was not the right person to lead, and that the future leader was already here. When he said that, he was looking at Naruto for his compassion to others, regardless if they were rude to him. "Yo master, how you been? Have you seen Naruto? I got something on my travels and thought it would be a perfect gift for him." Makarov looked sad at him, and the rest of the guild couldn't even match his eyes. "Master, what's wrong?" Gildarts was worried now. The room was too tense for his liking, and everyone couldn't seem to look him in the face right now. "Gildarts, you might want to sit down for this." "I'll stand, master." "What is going on?" There went Makarov telling him of all the abuse and ridicule that happened to Naruto at the hands of the guild. He also informed him about the incident with Erza, and how she humiliated him, causing him to run out of the building, and how he had been missing for a whole day now. Everyone was suffocating under Gildarts' magic that was being released around the room, and now it was causing everyone to see their lives flash before their eyes. On top of that, the anger in his face was noticeable as well, considering his veins in his forehead was seeable now. He looked at everyone and he growled out, "You little shits. If you think I'm angry now, you have no idea." He then sent more of his magic out over everyone, and they were feeling the pressure becoming too much for them, and were close to passing out. "You all think you're such hot shit, don't you? Just because Naruto can't use basic spells it's okay to pick on him for it. Well, guess what? Naruto is stronger than all of you because his magic was born into him, so he can't use other magic other than it. The problem is that he hasn't unlocked it yet. But that doesn't matter to any of you after all. He was the weakest person here, so you ganged up on him anyway, without thinking he might accidentally kill you if he activates it." Everyone couldn't even look at him and they were trying to catch their breath, but it was to no avail. Finally he released all the pressure from before and was walking to the exit. "All of you, training grounds in 30 minutes. Those that don't show up, I'll hunt down myself." Everyone was pale as a ghost. Sparring with Gildarts the way he was now was a death sentence. They looked at the master hoping for help. "You all made your beds, now you have to lay in them." Everyone was silently weeping and hoping they would make it out of this training situation in one piece. Sword World. Naruto was focusing on his sword movement and was blocking all of Saber's attacks. She was swinging wildly, hoping that she could get him to attack him so she could counter. However, he was just blocking most of her attacks and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally it came the time when she threw a hasty straight thrust at him, and he activated his darkness magic, and had the sword go in there. With a quick snap of his fingers her blade disappeared, and now she was unarmed. He placed the sword in her face and said, "I win." She nodded her head and he sat down on the ground breathing heavy from exhaustion. "That was tough," he panted. She was strong, it was almost impossible to beat her through sheer strength, so he had to improvise and get her to strike recklessly, until he could find the right opportunity to disarm her. Plus with his practice of this new magic not being much he had only one shot at it. The great thing about the sword, it allowed him to use darkness magic as the ultimate defense. It can absorb spells that are fired at it, and it can even absorb weapons and with more training people too. However, he won't be able to do any other magic other than that due to the sword having to be in his hands at all times. Luckily though, with the time he spent training with Saber, he managed to unlock the magic he had since birth. It was unusual at first, but he quickly learned how to control it after it blew up in his face a few times. The issue now was that he could only use this ability as a long-range means of firing energy spears at his opponents, but not for close range yet. So quite a lot more practice was necessary for him if he hopes to reach that level of control. Looking at Saber, he noticed she was smiling at him, and that was rather surprising, since she always had a poker face on most of the time. Now though she seemed happy, almost relieved, about something now. Well, you've done it, Naruto. You've managed to defeat me when my past wielder couldn't, and decided she didn't want the responsibility that came with the sword. I'm glad I met your expectations, so now what? She came close to him and then said, now it's time for the final step for you to master this power. We must fuse together and become one person, only then will you be able to control the sword and activate the second stage. Naruto nodded his head and soon she hugged him close, whispering, take care of Uu, she deserves happiness in her life. With that, a blinding light covered the entire area, and soon the world went white. Cave. Uu was sitting there watching Naruto in his sleep with the sword, and sensed that his magic was fluctuating every few minutes, and it was growing at points. His body was starting to adjust to the magic being pumped into it by the sword, and slowly but surely increasing his overall reserves as well. She notices his hair was changing color too, going from its bright golden to black as night, and it was now flattening around his face. That told Uu that he had succeeded in his efforts of mastering the sword, and beating the spirit that lied dormant inside of it. She smiled slightly, happy that he was going to be the new wielder, and he kept his promise of being with her forever. Unlike the last girl that came into the cave, from what she gathered she died not too long afterwards, and now is somewhere scattered in the wind. Lady Helseth, I'm glad I found you. Uu looked to her right and saw there was a girl wearing a yellow top that was strained by her large breasts standing next to her now. She was wearing black cape on her back, and she had black hair in a ponytail and green eyes to match her exotic look. She was wearing black pants that were showing off her curvaceous body, and how well-rounded her ass was. Looking at her, Uu felt slightly irritated on the grounds that she had such a busty body, while she was stuck in this childlike body. Well, she could use her magic to revert to her adult form she preferred, not even considering it can drain her reserves, and it was a pain to maintain at times as well. Who are you? I'm with the vampire clans that have served your family for generations. I asked to be your guardian for this generation as it was your mother's wish. I already have a guardian and he is finishing his training. She pointed to Naruto and Seraphim looked at him with a neutral look and replied, he is lazy Lady Uu, obviously he would make a horrible guard. Please accept my offer of being your guard. Uu gave her an irritated look, but before she could respond the dark aura gathered around Naruto's body, and soon it enveloped him to where it covered him like a heavy blanket. Now though, his eyes were open and they were red now with a single ring in the middle of them. Sitting up he looked around the cave to spot Euclid looking at him with mild interest and a new girl looking at him like he is a cockroach. Sitting up, Naruto put the sword at his side and looked at Uu and bowed his head. Apparently having Saber mixed with him has given him a new lease on life and changed some of the ways he thinks. While he mostly was still the same loving and caring person he was before he changed, he was now not going to take any crap from anyone or be put down by anyone who challenged him. Greetings Uu, I'm happy to be awake to see your beauty again. Uu blushed very lightly at that comment, and Seraphim was looking at him with annoyance now. May you introduce your guest to me now, my lady. This is Seraphim. She is a member of a clan that served my family. However, I have informed her I'm in no need of a guardian with you around. I see. Well, either way, it's nice to meet you, Seraphim. He tried to stand up, but when he finally did, he accidentally fell over. Being asleep for 2 days can do that to you if you're not careful. But the sad thing was that he fell on top of Seraphim and accidentally kissed her on the lips. Both of them were looking at each other with shock in their faces and blushes as well, while Uu was looking upset with this now. Standing up, Naruto immediately got distance between him and Seraphim, who was looking at him with shock. After a few tense moments she sighed and then bowed her head to him. Greetings, I'm Seraphim and I'm happy to meet you, my husband. Naruto's eyes popped out of his skull for a minute. Wait. Hold up, since when were we married? Just a moment ago after you kissed me on the lips. Naruto felt his heartbeat race for a few minutes, and then he fainted on the spot. However, Uu pinched his leg hard, causing him to wake up again. Wait, how the hell does a kiss equal marriage? Simple, in our clan's traditions, the first person we are to kiss on the lips shall be our spouse. We are to dedicate ourselves to them for the rest of our lives and theirs. Naruto nodded his head slowly, but looking over at Uu, he saw the fury in her eyes, and honestly it scared him. You my guard, don't forget who you serve first. Of course my lady, I won't forget the one that has given me the means to become stronger than I was before. Naruto bowed his head to her, and Seraphim bowed as well to her, considering this is the reason she was here in the first place. Looking up she saw a new note for her. You may stay around but be warned, he is mine first. I will not let you steal the only person in the world that has promised to be with me away from me. Got that? Seraphim was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. It was obvious to her that Uu cared more for Naruto than a guard, but as a love interest. Which is weird since fairies are not known for being the most romantically interested creatures. They are able to find mates for temporary times, and then they will toss them away later. So for a fairy to be attracted to someone plus trying make sure they stay with them was unusual. Then again, she was an unusual fairy as it was, so there's nothing shocking about this outcome either. So after Naruto and the two girls figured out the whole situation with the marriage and the guardianship, they decided to practice in the cave a little bit, that way they can gauge each other's strengths and weaknesses, and how to cover them. In doing this, Naruto managed to find out that Seraphim, while having the vampire magic flowing in her body, she also had a sword style as well, along with her own unique magic to it. She called her style Swallow Return Strike, and it apparently derives around her using leaves to confuse her opponents, and using them to strike their enemies with it. Plus her leaf magic was unusual as well, because they had a draining effect when they either landed on someone or were around them as well. This allowed her to drain their magic into the leaves or drain the energy out of the spells that were aimed at her. With her vampire magic, she could grow wings and fly, and she had enhanced strength, speed, and endurance that made her difficult for most normal mages. However, she had a critical weakness of being predictable at times. Who however had little to no weakness in her overall skill set. She was faster than anything he had ever seen, and her physical strength was so great that she could bring down mountains with ease. Next, her magic was insane, considering she could control light and darkness at the same time, making any element she wants. Also, mastery over life and death magic to the point she only has to speak, and they can die or live, depending on which one she says. This however gives her minor headaches due to the fact that she is feeling the damage done to them by her, as hers. Surprisingly, her pen turned into a scythe, and she could swing the giant thing around like it was a toothpick, and cut through anything she wanted. Plus she could make a barrier in which performing magic of any kind was cut off, and her ability to control time and space was also something to consider. She could kill someone without letting them escape her time stop, and then she could alter the world around her, where she would be hurt actually never happens. However, due to greatness of her power, this also meant she had to control herself to the point she could barely show emotions in battle, that way she doesn't use more power than she should. Naruto practiced around a little more and saw that he now could use the darkness with his sword, to the point where it will now erase inorganic material that it is aimed at. Plus his darkness shield has gotten stronger to take stronger attacks, and he was now working on it to where he can fire back spells at people, letting them have a taste of their own medicine, in a sense. His own brand of magic had increased to the point he could summon about 20 energy beams to use as long-range attacks. Naruto also learned how to make and control them long enough to use them as sabers and spears in his hands as well. After training for a little while, the three of them agreed to rest for the night, and then head back to his guild, where they would join as members now. However, he had two gifts for him that she had had since she arrived in this cave years ago. One was a black and red armor that looked like a bodysuit with a black biker-like helmet to go on his head, Vanitas outfit from Kingdom Hearts, Birth of Sleep. The second armor looked more like medieval armor with a black and white shade to it, Terra's armor, with color change. I made these to go with the sword. I hope you will use them too. I will lady you, thank you for the gifts. She nodded her head and then wrote, let's get some sleep. I want to arrive at the guild tomorrow early in the morning. Agreed. As the saying goes, early bird catches the worm. With that agreed on, Naruto and the two girls found a comfortable queen-size bed that he used while she was in the cave. They got into the bed with his sword lying at the side of it, and him getting in the middle of the bed. Yu took his left side and snuggled into him, while Seraphim took his right and was snuggling into his arm as well. Fairy tale. Next day, the guild was quiet. Ever since Gildarts returned, everyone was scared out of their minds at the thought of pissing him off. With Naruto missing, things had gone downhill for the guild in general. The happy atmosphere disappeared, and everyone pretty much was concerned with angering the older members of the guild. Gildarts was watching the guild like some hawk, waiting for one of them to slip up and say something bad about Naruto, so he could have a reason to smash them. Makarov had warned him to try and keep his temper in check, but he was too blinded now to care. The hall saw the guild doors open, and they figured it must be Naruto returning now. They were right, but something was different this time around. First off, he had two girls with him, and his appearance had changed drastically as well. He had black hair, and his eyes were red with a black circle in the center of it. He was carrying a black sword at his side, and he had a straight look on his face with an aura that screamed, "Don't fuck with me." The two girls were looking around the room with something akin to boredom from the silver-haired girl and disgust from the black-haired girl. Honestly, the black-haired girl had everyone's attention only because of her large bouncy breasts. The silver-haired one had the attention of everyone because of how cute she looked. Naruto put the whole room in a state of unease due to his intimidating look. Gildarts didn't care how scary he looked now. He dropped his drink and hugged the boy with all of his strength. Naruto was barely able to breathe from the powerful man's tight embrace that was crushing his body. Yu saw this happening, and she tapped Gildarts' arm, and Naruto collapsed to the ground trying to gather his bearings. Gildarts looked at the small girl, and while he wasn't an expert sensor, he could feel her magic was greater than his, despite it barely leaking out right now. "Naruto, it's good to see you again, but what the hell happened to you?" As Gildarts led him to a private section of the bar, Naruto looked at Yu, and she held up another note. "You have my permission." Naruto nodded his head and recounted his story of how he found the cave and the sword. Then how he met Yu and how she was a fairy with her flashing a bit of her wings, shocking Gildarts. Naruto then continued how he met the spirit of the sword and managed to fuse with it, thus pushing one of his parents' DNA to the surface more than the other one. Finally how he met Seraphim and how they ended up married by her clan's traditions. Gildart was shocked, but he had to admit that if he was hitched to her, he might not complain too much. But he could tell from how the two interacted they were not happy with the situation, but they would try to get along. Finishing his story, Naruto went up to the master and said, "I would like to form my own team with these two, and for them to gain their own guild stamps, please." Naruto heard Natsu snickering in the back about how he was an incompetent leader, and how he might get them killed on their first mission. Naruto, a while back, would have let a comment like that slide, but now he wasn't that kind boy that had left the guild with a broken heart. He swung his blade backwards and obliterated all the tables and sent everyone in the path into a wall. Natsu got the worst of the attack, due to him being the focus of it. He was face planted into the wall, but he quickly recovered from it. Jumping out of the wall he charged at Naruto and swung a flame-covered fist at him. Naruto ducked out of the way of the attack, backed away, and then waited for him to charge again. Naruto promptly dodged the following kick, and then he ducked under another jab. In doing all this, he was wearing Natsu out quickly. Naruto finally grew tired of the onslaught and decided to deal with him squarely. So with a quick swing he slammed the flat end of his blade against his stomach and sent him crashing into the wall again, but this time rendering him unconscious. Naruto looked to the crowd that was shocked he won this fight and shouted, "Listen well you stupid peons. I'm not taking any more shit from any of you. If you want to fight, bring it on, I'll crush all of you into dust." Everyone was silent, and most were backing away from him now with fright in their eyes. Naruto turned to leave the building, but he saw Levi standing at the entrance with tears in her eyes. His expression softened at the sight of her, and as he contemplated on what to do she ran up to him and punched his head. After doing this she leaned into him and started crying into his chest. Naruto embraced her and whispered comforting words into her ears. Naruto whispered lightly so only her and a few nearby could hear. "Sorry for earlier, Levi. How about we talk about our new team later, huh?" She was surprised at first, but she nodded her raised head in agreement, and she turned around to stand at his side, her expression cheerful. However, Naruto saw Erza standing there now, and she looked very happy to see him. When she approached him she promptly said, "I'm sorry Naruto, about what I did to you earlier. How about we go on that date later this week?" For a while he was silent and then he chuckled. "We go on a date? As if I would date someone as weak and pathetic as you. Stay away from me and don't bother me again, coward." Naruto furiously stomped past her with Levi sending a blank look at her. She however had a broken expression on her face. The boy that used to love her was gone and in his place was someone else. The knight that would protect the fairy that had chosen him. It had been a few years since the incident with Naruto, and things had been rather tense for quite some time now. Fairy Tail still had a happy and joyful atmosphere, but everyone was stepping on pins to avoid causing another incident. Makarov was far stricter on the bullying in the guild and the members that were responsible. On top of that he made sure that no one upset you due to her status. He knew, but no one else knew, she was a fairy. With a quick demonstration of her power he knew that with the utterance of a single word, she could erase the entire guild completely from the world. Gildarts took a 100-year mission in order to clear his head on things, and to train for Naruto. He could tell the boy had grown since he left, and most likely would continue to grow, so he wanted to be ready for the day they fought. What people didn't know was while it was 3 days for everyone else, it was 3 months for Naruto in the dream world. Time was distorted there, and he learned more in that time than he ever did in the real world. However, the issue at hand was that he was busy protecting you from all threats that would come for her. But those that he perceives as enemies trying to attack her or take her from him and Seraphim, which they wouldn't allow to happen. In the guild now, there were 2 new members. One was a blonde with brown eyes and had a blue bow in her hair. She had large breasts, and she was wearing a blue and white top along with a blue skirt. The other was also a girl wearing a long white dress with blue arm straps on her shoulders, and she carried a staff in her right hand. These 2 girls were Lucy and Yuna, Final Fantasy X, and both were summoners, but they had different methods of how they did it. Lucy used the zodiac keys as opposed to Yuna who preferred using spirit-filled statues to summon beasts to her aid. Both girls were friends since childhood, and both had pasts they wanted to escape in order to live their dreams as mages. They ran into a man in the port town, and whilst Lucy was interested in him, Yuna was a bit skeptical about his honesty from the beginning. Long story short, they meet Natsu, and this led to them causing massive amounts of collateral damage, and joining him on his return to Fairy Tail, after creaming the creep that tried to kidnap them. When they got there, both girls couldn't stop looking around the guild building in excitement, and wondering what kind of mischief they were going to get into. Before they could say anything, Natsu kicked someone in the face and sent them flying, which sparked a large brawl in the guild. Both girls were a little worried about everything, but Murahin informed them that it was all right, and it was common in the guild. Mira had changed over the years after Naruto's incident, and she was now kinder to her guild mates, and she even wore standard feminine dresses, as opposed to her original gothic look. She had done some soul searching a few years ago, had realized that she needed to really clean up her act, and try to make good terms with Naruto after a specific incident. The guild was getting rowdier, and soon magic was being flared around the room. Lucy panicked and Yuna got ready to summon her beasts to protect them, but before it escalated further, the entire room was lit up in a bright light. Before anyone could say anything, the magic in the room disappeared. Looking around, they saw U was standing at the main entrance holding out her hand, her magic glowing a deep blue. Everyone knew if she was here then he wasn't too far behind her, and they didn't want him to be the one to break up their fights. Considering the fact that he could demolish them in seconds with a single sword swipe on his lazy days made everyone scared of him. Plus U had pretty much sealed away all the magic in the room, meaning no one could do anything just yet. Lucy however thought she was the cutest thing ever and asked, "Who's she, Mir?" Standing up and dusting herself off, she smiled at Lucy. "That's U. She is one of the S classes here and she is part of Team Knight. Word of advice. Don't mess with her if you value your life. She has enough power to crush the entire guild, but then again it's not her you have to worry about." Before Lucy could ask, the doors were kicked open and entering the room was a figure everyone knew, but it had changed so much. He was a black-haired boy with dark red eyes with a single ring in both. He was wearing tattered red cloak around his legs that were covered in long black tights. He was wearing a pair of sandals, and his jacket was a bit tight around his chest. But underneath it was an armor set that was similar in design to a normal knight's, but it held the Fairy Guild mark on it. The boy was Naruto and he looked at the room with a harsh look, causing everyone in his line of sight to scurry away from him, well almost everyone. Natsu leapt at him, and before he could realize what happened he was sent flying again with a single punch. He crashed into the wall and lay on the floor unconscious. Lucy and Yuna were shocked considering they saw how strong he was. Mira giggled at their shock. "Don't worry, this happens more than you think." It's not surprising because while Natsu is gifted in many areas, Naruto is actually stronger than most of the members here. Hell, he could thrash us all if he wanted without breaking a single sweat, being completely honest. Lucy looked at the black-haired boy that was closing in on the bar, and his presence was making her shiver. U, who was walking with him, wrote something on her notepad. She showed it to Naruto, and after a while he looked at her, nodded but continued walking. Instead of sitting at it, he went behind the bar and into the kitchen, and close people could hear he was cooking in there. U took a seat at the bar waiting. Lucy was rather confused, but it was Yuna who asked, "What's the deal with that?" This time a black-haired shirtless boy came up. "That's normal. Naruto is so loyal to you to the point where if she writes down she is hungry, he will make her a feast fit for a royal, no matter what. But that usually happens after she gets her daily tea." Leaves filled the room signaling to everyone Seraphim was there, and she filled U's cup to the brim with warm tea. "And there is Seraphim, trust me, you don't want to get on her bad side. She is loyal only to her teammates. Trust me when I say she is ruthless. She has torn into many of the males here and left them whimpering and mentally scarred from her words alone." Lucy was surprised considering said ruthless female looked normal, except for her incredibly large breasts. On that note, she could tell Seraphim was bigger than her. Hell, Seraphim's bust was the biggest she had ever seen. So they are a 3-person team then. Yuna was surprised when Mira and the others who heard shook their head. Before she could ask who the others were, there was another bang at the slowly closing doors, and in entered a short white-haired man in a jester's hat with 2 girls at his side. One had long silver hair, blood-red eyes, and pale skin to match. She was wearing a black dress that had a cut running down the side of it showing off her legs. Her black-heeled shoes showed she was stylish and strangely comfortable in what she was wearing. The outfit was completed with a silver cross with a red eye in the center hanging off her neck. Her dress showed she was well developed, making Lucy and Yuna feel a little more self-conscious. The girl next to her was a brunette with gleaming red eyes and pale skin as well. She wasn't as big as her 2 female friends, but she had a killer figure nevertheless. She was wearing a black dress that was partly gothic, it had wing on each side. Her outfit ended just after her ass and showed off her amazing legs. Black-heeled boots reached up to her knees, and a sharp-looking set of claws grew on her fingertips. Both girls joined U and Seraphim at the bar, and each took a cup of tea and started drinking it. Those 2 are also members of his team as well. The silver-haired one is Mocha, and the black-haired girl is Sarasvati. Both girls hail from the same village as Seraphim, but what they are we don't know exactly. All we do know is that for some odd reason all the girls refer to Naruto as their husband. Lucy's eyes popped out, and Yuna had shock plastered all over her face. "He's married to his teammates." Gray nodded his head and Kana added along with this. "Yep, they're married to him by a tradition in their clan where the first man to kiss them becomes their husband. Very weird, but we don't argue with it, and that leaves us without getting our asses handed to us." The idiots did it again. Makarov was standing on the higher balcony and shouting about the mess everyone made, but when he got to Naruto he said, "Naruto, your team has been given high marks from the king himself." "Congratulations on this." Makarov shot the boy serving food a smile, and said boy nodded to the old man. He then turned his focus back to Yu who was busy eating the food on the table. Her style was majestic but quick, considering she had a full plate a second ago, and now was wanting more of it. Whoa. She can really put it away, can't she? Yu heard this and turned to Lucy and Yuna, and showed them her most recent note. "I'm hungry, but I'm not a slob like Natsu." Both girls sweat dropped and resigned themselves to just watching the girl lead, whilst the master went over his belief in fairy tale and their own path. Later that day, Lucy and Yuna had received their guild stamps, Lucy's on her hand in pink and Yuna getting it on her arm in blue. Both girls were excited about being part of the guild, so they weren't watching where they were going. They accidentally bumped into Seraphim, and she dropped the cup of tea she was carrying. Turning to them, red eyes glared down at the unfortunate newbies. "You filthy maggots. How dare you cost me a cup of tea for Lady Helseth?" Lucy shivered in fear and Yuna looked unnerved. It looked like they would fight until Naruto said, "Forget it. We've got a job now, so hurry up." He walked out of the bar with Yu at his side, and the three girls followed their teammates. Everyone stood out of their way, and the minute the door shut behind them, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. "That was close. I thought she was going to maim us." Lucy was coming off her fearful state, but Yuna was staring at where the group disappeared, and noticed that the entire guild was on edge when they were around. This didn't make any sense to her. Why were they terrified of him? "Oh, you guys are so lucky. Seraphim usually beats the shit out of someone for making her drop the tea. Natsu, Gray, and Loki all learned that lesson the hard way." Murahan was washing the dishes that Yu finished and was looking at their direction with regret in her eyes. But then they noticed someone new walk up to the bar. It was short white-haired girl wearing a long blue dress. She had on white gloves and on her face was a small red blush. You know she only deals with people like that if she believes they bothered you. Plus you know better than getting on their bad side after what happened a few years ago. Mira looked away from her sister knowing she was right concerning both incidents. Asana saw the confusion in the girl's eyes and decided to tell them about both incidents. The first one being a few days after his transformation and the arrival of Yu and Seraphim. Flashback begin. Mira was broke at the moment, and she needed money to buy some new clothes that she wanted from the store. She was going to go to Naruto and take his money regardless of the master's warnings. Okay, he was stronger now, but she was in S class, and he giving her money was just what he did. Plus he wouldn't tell the master regardless of him watching her half the time. So arriving at his place, she knocked on the door, and Yu opened it. "What do you want?" "Read the note. I need to talk to Naruto about borrowing some money." Yu's eyes narrowed. Another note came up. That lost her feel pain and despair. Mira was miffed she was being disrespected by this brat, so she went to knock her out of the way. However, she felt a blade at her neck and saw pissed off Naruto. "I know you weren't about to hit you. Doing that would be an unwise career choice." Before Mira could say anything, she saw him swing his sword and send her flying. Hitting the ground with a thud, she tried to get up, but Naruto was right on top of her, his sword buried right next to her head, and his magic gathering in his hand. "These shits think that I was gone for only a few days. Well, guess what? I wasn't. During my time in a special place, it was about 3 months. So yeah, I got about 3 months training in a few days. What about you? What kind of training did you get done in the last few days?" His aura was now black and purple, and he was gathering magic to the point where it could kill her at close range. Seeing he wasn't fucking around anymore and this wasn't the same kid she took money from in the past, she backed down. Noticing she had surrendered, he removed his sword and went back up to his place and slammed the door. Mira looked on in fear and depression. The kind boy everyone once knew was gone, and in his place was this ruthless warrior. Few months later, Mira was watching on in shock and fear. Her sister was standing before a possessed elfman, and she was trying to talk him down. But he was not in the right state of mind, and he was about to take her out. His arm was close to hitting her, but he was sent flying by an unknown attack. Looking over to her left, she saw Naruto was standing there with his hand out along with his teammates. Elfman rose from the rubble and roared at them. Then he took off in a charge and was ready to crush them, but Naruto countered his attack. He grabbed the offending hand and slammed him in the ground. Then brought his sword up and with a single swing sent thousands of blades at him with ease. After the attack, his opponent was cut up badly, and he could barely move. Walking up to the brutalized elfman, he brought out some kind of black orb and put it against him. His monster form was slowly being drained into the orb, and once it was finished, elfman lay on the ground still injured. Naruto picked up the orb and banished it to his pocket dimension. Asana had stars in her eyes at how he managed to save them, and thus gave birth to her fangirl crush on him. Mira was now standing and wobbled over to him with a smile on her face. "Thank you so much, Naruto." Turning to her, he gave her a mild glare and responded, "You know this is your fault for being so weak. I had to waste my time to come and save you from something that shouldn't have happened if you were stronger. Stay out of my way, weakling." Yu and the others were slightly happy at him tearing into her like he did, but they were upset that their time was being wasted. Naruto went over to Elfman and picked him up on his shoulders and carried him back to the guild. Asana was talking to the group that would answer some of her questions, which mostly was Levi at this point. Mira stood in the back with tears in her eyes, realizing that she was weaker than him now. On top of that, he said the same things to her that she told him many times over. She really was considering her career path, and maybe being a mage wasn't good enough for her in the end. Her direction was bad, and she made many poor choices through this mission, and she might not be able to handle the pressure anymore. Flashback end. After recounting the tale, Lucy and Yuna were shocked at his brutal treatment of his guildmates. Gray, sitting at the bar with Kana and Natsu, nodded, knowing this story. Honestly, we do deserve this, Natsu replied in a serious tone that was unusual for him. How can you guys say that? Yuna was wondering how they could actually take this level of abuse. To be fair, we treated him like that for years, so we are just reaping what we sowed. Kana took a large swig of her drink. We basically bullied him and ridiculed him like he does us now since we were kids. He had his heart broken then too, and this probably sparked his change in persona. Honestly, everyone is trying to get on his good side again, but he doesn't talk civilly to anyone not a part of his group. Even then he only talks to the master and Gildart when he is around. Lucy was sad for them, but Yuna was a little more understanding that you two pay for your crimes in the end. In this case, he treats someone like shit, then you are going to be treated like shit as well. Now she was wondering what kind of mission that team got that was so important they leave after just getting back. Naruto's place. Naruto was happy to be back at his place. Everything here was where he wanted it to be. Wu was sitting at the table drinking tea in order to prepare for their next mission. Seraphim and Sarasvati were next to Wu to make sure everything was okay with her tea. Mocha was sitting on the counter in the kitchen, watching the two of them fret over Wu and sighed at them. They needed to know anything bothering her would disappear in an instant if she wanted it to. Looking to the stairs, he saw Levi was coming downstairs with a book in her hands. After getting down, she greeted everyone, and they returned with their own form of a greeting. When Naruto returned, Levi jumped on the chance of being part of their group. Of course, Seraphim was against the idea considering they were already three of them. However, she was outvoted by both Naruto and Wu, and she was forced to agree with them. But after a few missions she did admit out of everyone in the guild, Levi was the only one that she truly was neutral to and might even like. She would never admit it really, but it was the thought that counts. Especially when she wasn't calling you a piece of trash. After making sure everyone was there, he turned to them and stated his announcement. Alright team, listen up. We have a job to investigate an unknown digging site and crew that has been rumored to be looking for a dark artifact of Zera's creation. So we are to go in and clear them out and find the artifact if it's still there. If not, then we are to start looking for it elsewhere. Everyone in the room nodded and soon everybody was gathering their material for this new assignment. Looking at Mocha and Sarasvati, he remembered how they ended up living with him as well. Flashback. Naruto had just finished his third mission with his team and was about to head back to the guild. However, before he could manage to get on the way there, he saw two people standing in their way. Seraphim looked terrified of them, and he was staring at them with boredom. One was a silver-haired girl with red eyes, while the other had black hair and red eyes. Both of them were glaring at him and Seraphim. Seraphim, what the hell has taken you? You were supposed to have brought Lady Helseth back to the village by now. The black-haired girl was approaching them, and Seraphim was shivering at the sight of her. Between her and the girl in front of her, Seraphim knew that the girl was stronger than her by a stretch. But then Naruto appeared in front of her, his sword was at his side. The black-haired girl was surprised by this, but before she could summon her own blade, the silver-haired one made herself known. Look, we aren't here to fight just for Lady Helseth. Let us take her back to our village and we can let this whole thing go. Naruto gripped his sword, but Yu stood in front of him with a note in her hand. I won't leave Naruto-kun. He is my guardian along with Seraphim. If you have issues with this, then fight him. Naruto nodded after he saw the note. He started conducting his magic through his sword and was ready to fight. The silver-haired girl sighed, and the black-haired girl summoned her sword. Her blade was blue, and the silver-haired girl was standing there stretching out her hands and legs ready to fight. Seraphim stood beside Yu, and she watched with nervousness in her eyes. Considering her master informed her that Naruto's power was from the sword she made. Besides, after seeing his strength while training with him, she knew that this fight would be painfully one-sided. Her superiors were strong and dangerous, but Naruto was much more dangerous. The girl with black hair charged at him and swung her blade, but Naruto countered it. She was now stumbling from the sudden parry. This led to him slamming his blade down on hers when she attempted to block him from sheer instinct. Her blade was smashed into pieces, and he soon had her pinned to the ground. But he jumped out of the way of a leg coming at his head. Moving backwards, Naruto saw the silver-haired girl was standing there in front of him now. She brought her leg down on the ground and it cracked the surface. Carefully examining her, Naruto quickly charged her with his sword drawn and swung at her when he was close enough. But she dodged his attack with her incredible speed. However, Naruto turned around again. His magic shot off the blade with an arc of black and red energy going straight at her. The girl was running away from the attack until she saw it stop, leaving a good-sized cut in the ground. It was about 15 meters long and some feet deep. She saw him standing there as if it was nothing, causing her to feel unnerved. She charged at him, soon throwing punches at him, but he was dodging with ease, and after a while his sword was thrust forward, causing the girl to jump over the blade and try to throw a kick at his head instead. But he blocked it with his free hand and brought her down with a lot of force. A series of cracks appearing underneath her limb form. The black-haired girl shouted, "Lady Mocha." The brunette formed another blue blade, and she planned to cut him in half. Naruto quickly slashed backwards, forcing the girl to block his attack. The blade cut through hers again, forcing her to jump away from being sliced. But once he was done with his attack on the black-haired girl, he picked up the silver-haired girl and threw her. Both girls went crashing on the ground after the silver-haired one flew into the brunette. Summoning some of his dark magic, he made it appear beneath them. This forced their legs into the shadows, making them struggle in escaping. Now due to conceit, both girls struggled for a little bit, but finally they relented, removing his shadows from their body, allowing them to stand up. Now then, you two promise to stop bothering us about this whole bringing her to the village thing. She is happy this way, and as her knight it is my duty to make sure she is happy regardless of everyone else's preference. He didn't see it, but Yu had a near unnoticeable blush on her face, and she was smiling at him. Not anything close to a big one, but it showed immense joy. The black-haired girl stood up to walk over to them, but she soon tripped dramatically over a small dent in the ground left in the wake of battle, and landed on Naruto with lips connecting them. Naruto was stunned and wondered what was going to happen. Seraphim was shocked and pissed at the same time in this situation. Yu, on the other hand, was just furious. Sorry about that, husband. I tripped, I'm afraid, she said with a suspiciously smug look on her face. Accident, he found that very hard to believe after that. But before he could say anything, the silver-haired one grabbed his jacket and brought him into a deep intense kiss, causing everyone else to stare in shock. That was until the ground started shaking. They turned to see a very furious Euclid Helseth at the moment. The silver-haired girl removed her lips from his and said, "My name is Mocha and that is Sarasvita, and we are now staying with you, our dear husband." Naruto looked behind him and saw a pissed-off Fu, and he knew it was going to take a lot of work to get this over with. Flashback end. Since that day it was agreed that they could stay and report back to their clan if they must. However, he made it very clear to them he was her servant first before being their husband. None objected to this, considering she would kill them on a whim, even if it meant a minor headache for her and Naruto. The train ride to the dig site was boring for all of them, and they knew sooner or later they were going to be running into trouble. Since they were considered by many one of the strongest teams in Fairy Tail, this not only brought in a lot of missions for the guild, but also a lot of heat for their team. So if anyone felt the team might be coming for them, they would immediately try to set something up to avoid that. It was a few hours and they finally arrived at the nearby town that would lead them to the dig site. Entering town, Naruto noticed that all of the girls were getting lusted after by all the males in this town, but he wasn't worried about it. These guys had no chance of winning their affection, considering they were loyal to him as their husband and as her guardian. But the biggest issue was if one of them tried something, would he kill him on the spot or remove his limbs one by one? They ran out of the town and proceeded to the dig site. Yu was riding on Naruto's back because she wanted to be carried. So being the loyal knight he agreed to her demands and carried her well therein. The girls were keeping up with him, and each of them were focused on getting ready for a fight in case there were enemies there. However, Levi was forced to be carried by Mocha due to her not having the same enhanced reflexes as the rest of them. While she hated doing it, Mocha knew if she didn't do it then Naruto and Yu would punish her, and while she was into kinky stuff, that was not the rough time she was looking for. Arriving at the dig site, they saw that they had excavated the side of the mountain, and there were digging tools everywhere. Yu was placed on the ground, and Levi hopped off of Mocha's back, and they started moving to get some separation between each other. That way they avoid getting overwhelmed by their enemies within seconds because they were not spaced far enough. Some dark mages emerged from the cave. They were joking about something. But the joking quickly ended upon seeing the mages in front of them. Some recognized them instantly. It's those bastards from Fairy Tail. With that one comment, everyone gathered some magic and was firing off spells against them. Spells ranging from fire to lighting were now flying straight at them. His sword now in hand, Naruto gathered some magic into the blade and slashed sideways, sending a wave of black energy at them, leading to their attacks being erased, and his wave hitting them. They were sent flying into the side of the mountain, falling unconscious from the attacks. The group snorted at these weak mages, since they couldn't even fight properly without being overwhelmed by someone stronger than them. They were knocked out with a single hit, which was embarrassing considering they wanted more of a challenge. So entering the cave, they started looking deeper to see what was there. It took a few minutes until finally they arrived at the main center of the cave, where there was at least 30 mages stood talking to each other. Naruto walked into the center of the room and shouted, "By order of the Magic Council, all dark mages are to surrender or be taken out." The group looked at the swordsman and his friends and started snickering. "Guys, let's teach this dumbass what it means to cross us. Then we can enjoy the girls that he decided to bring us." Naruto's eyes started glowing gold, and his sword was glowing with black energy. In a single step he was now on the other side of the cave, cutting down a handful of the mages there now. The girls, deciding he didn't deserve all the fun, ran into the middle of the fight with Yu and Levi providing support from behind. Seraphim and Saravista were swinging their blue and green swords at the enemies, cutting them down with ease. Every so often they traded swords after sending them into someone's next to the other chest, and then that other would use the helping blade. Summoning their wings, they commenced flying over the group at times, and striking them down with ease. The men weren't dead, but they were bleeding badly from the deepness of the cuts. Sometimes they summoned small weapons to aid them, and nailed the mages in the chest with them, sending them into the land of unconscious. Mocha was enjoying the fight more than the others were. With one punch, she was sending fools flying all over the place. Spinning, she swung her leg, kicking one across the face, and he embedded in the wall as well. Leaping over a bolt of lightning and spinning downward, she brought her heel onto the man's head, sending him into the ground. With unmatched speed she disappeared again and appearing behind another group, continued her brutal assault. It was sending her foes flying with a flick of her fingers. Sometimes she put her hand on their chest and sent them flying as well or embedded them into the ground. Levi was writing out different spells sending them into some of the enemies that were either far away or getting too close to her. Some were hit with fire spells, others were hit with spells like lightning. So while she didn't have the same physical skills the others had, she was still devastating in her own right. Soon the entire room was filled with moaning voices from the immeasurable pain that they were suffering from. They heard something coming from another tunnel that was located behind the crowd of mages they had defeated. Out of it came a guy wearing a black hoodie, carrying a sword in his hand, looking at them. His face had tons of piercing with a dragon tattoo going across his entire face. The guy was more powerful than the rest of the punks they had dealt with, but he was not an S-rank threat. Being honest, he was more along the lines of a B-rank mage. The guy looked at them scoffing. This peeved off Naruto for being underestimated ever since he had changed. That was one of the few things that still got underneath his skin more than anything. So you are the assholes beating up my men. Sorry to break it to you, but this was all for nothing. The lullaby is no longer here, some guy carrying a scythe left with it. Not before he killed a couple of my guys. Well, seeing that this piece of shit doesn't have the artifact, can we deal with him and move on? The man's eyes narrowed slightly and he withdrew his sword. Don't underestimate me, bitch. Seraphim was now angry and was about to attack him until she was stopped by Mocha. She motioned her to look over at Naruto, who was now standing in front of him with his jacket off his body. He tossed it to Yu, who caught it and held it closely to her body. His sword had disappeared as well, meaning that he wasn't bothering with his blade this time around to fight this guy. Should have kept the sword out because I'm going to wreck you now. The man took off in a dash, swinging his blade at the shirtless teen. But he caught his blade with 2 fingers, and it snapped with ease. After breaking his blade, Naruto sent a vicious punch to his face, sending him flying. Soon he smashed into the wall with a thud, creating a crater behind him. He coughed up blood from the impact of the attack, and promptly lost consciousness. Naruto scoffed and started walking back to the entrance of the cave. Come on, the flute is with Erger, meaning Eisenwald has it. All of them knew about the major dark guilds in the country, and those that were inside of them. But that is not what was worrying them now. It was Naruto. He seemed angry now more than usual. Something about the Gilder flute upset him, and no one knew why, not even Yu. Naruto would never admit it, but something about that damn flute filled him with dread. Like somehow he was connected to it in some way, but he didn't know how. Plus the power that it wielded was something that he didn't want to deal with. Especially since that its attack was based off of Yu's most dangerous ability. She tells someone to die, and they do just that, die. It caused her great amounts of pain from feeling everyone dying around him. But this flute removed the process of feeling it, and regardless of what people believed, he was going to make sure the damn thing was dealt with. Now he only hoped this mission would go smoothly without interference. Thanks for watching.